to shut down reports that White House staffers are feeling besieged, saying instead that the mood in the White House is fantastic. Speaking to Reuters Wednesday, Trump said the White House is functioning beautifully, and he listed multiple accomplishments, including progress on battling Islamic State militants, the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, and an improving economy. Trump's comments came amid reports that his White House was in chaos because of the growing Russia scandal that has engulfed this week's news cycle. One advisor told Politico earlier this week that Donald Trump Jr.'s decision to meet with a Kremlin-linked lawyer offering information from the Russian government meant to discredit Hillary Clinton can't be dismissed as a conspiracy and has left top aides with a limited ability to control the fallout. But Trump denied that the White House is in disarray, saying instead that the mood in the White House is fantastic. "We have done more in 5 months than practically any president in history," he said. "There's not a thing that we're not doing well in. The White House is functioning beautifully, despite the hoax made up by the Democrat." HuffPost goes out in search of Middle America. Having made its name as a home for liberals and the blog posts of coastal elites, the recently renamed HuffPost is seeking to reinforce its new, less partisan image with a 7-week bus tour through Middle America to listen and learn what it means to be American today, the site will announce on Thursday. Starting in September, a traveling party of rotating HuffPost staff members led by Editor-in-Chief Lydia Paul Green will visit more than 20 cities, eschewing the coasts for the likes of Fort Wayne, Indiana, Oxford, Mississippi and Odessa, Texas. At each city, the site will host events, roll out planned stories with local media outlets, send out reporters to write about the communities and collect stories from residents in their own words. It's a unique project for a media organization that made its name as the crusading home for progressives, even attaching a note to each story during the election about then-candidate Donald Trump, calling him a xenophobe, racist and misogynist. The tag was removed on Election Day. Founder Arianna Huffington created the Huffington Post in 2004 to be a liberal version of the Drudge Report. But Huffington left her namesake site last year to found a new health and wellness startup, leaving the renamed HuffPost in the hands of Paul Green, formerly of the New York Times, and Chief Executive Jared Grust, who are reshaping the site's identity. "This would be identity-defining for HuffPost," said Paul Green in an interview. "We are in a moment for determining our own identity and the role we play in the overall news ecosystem and what the next iteration of that looks like. And this felt like a great way to go out and report out the story of who we should be in the world." Though many of the cities the group is visiting voted for Hillary Clinton in last year's election, all but 2 of the states went to Trump. But Paul Green says they're not visiting Trump country, pointing to a reason for each city or state on the tour, like an interesting community college system in Fort Wayne or Detroit's large Arab American population. Hillary Frey, HuffPost's director of editorial strategy who came up with the bus tour idea, also pointed out that logistically it didn't make sense to go to the corners of the country where the distance from one city to the next would be too far. "We were basically looking at a pretty eclectic mix of communities that represent a lot of different facets of American life," Paul Green said. "All of these ideological divisions, in the media, are confusing right now, and for me it's less about left or right, it's who are you more oriented toward, more oriented to the interest of the wealthy and powerful, or are you orientated toward the people who are not in the top 20%? For Paul Green, HuffPost has always been about listening and having an ear to the ground through their contributor network. The bus tour, she said, would give a real-life version of that contributor network to go out into the country and really listen to these people's voices in a direct and in-person way." Paul Green pointed to the Atlantic's James Fallows' 3-year tour of the country in a single-engine plane he piloted as inspiration. "A lot of us are thinking about journalism and how journalism relates to people's lives, and this project was really a direct result of that, wanting to get out into the country and hear from people about the things that mattered most to them rather than us deciding from our office in the East Village what are the stories that are most important to Americans and hear what people have to say," she said. "So much of journalism today is elites speaking to elites, and I see the role of HuffPost as speaking for really everyone. Media organizations have been criticized for parachuting journalists into areas where there is normally little national media presence, instead of actually hiring a correspondent who lives and works in those communities. While Paul Green acknowledged that the bus tour is in a way, drive-by journalism, she pointed out that HuffPost is partnering with local news organizations and hopes to use the tour to inform their hiring decisions in the future. As we expand to places beyond the coast, we're going to use what we learned on this trip to decide where to deploy people, Paul Green said. This is less about we're here to parachute and to do the stories as it is we're here to understand and listen and use what we learned to figure out what positive role can we play. Selena Zito, a columnist for the New York Post and Washington Examiner who lives near Pittsburgh and rose to prominence last year through her reporting showing a clear path for Trump to win the presidency, said that real investment in local media by hiring reporters has the better payoff, though a listening tour can be an important step in understanding local issues and problems. The attempt is important. It's a recognition that there needs to be a better understanding of different cultures in the country, Zito said. It depends on their approach. If it's a lot of grandstanding associated with it, that might take away what their ultimate goal is, which is to have a better understanding of the people and culture outside of Washington and New York. Two sources with knowledge of the tour said its total price tag could be near $1 million, which will come just weeks after the HuffPost newsroom was hit with some 39 layoffs as part of parent company Verizon Communications Incorporated's acquisition of Yahoo! A HuffPost spokesperson declined to comment on the cost of the tour, but Paul Green rejected the notion that the bus tour will suck up money that could be used for hiring more journalists. As part of the merger there were layoffs. That does not mean we're not investing in hiring more journalists in addition to undertaking this really cool project. The things are not mutually exclusive, she said. I reject the notion that this is somehow an either-or. I think this is both. The election that's on pace to shatter U.S. spending records. The Illinois governor's race is on pace to be the most expensive statewide election in U.S. history, a spending bonanza expected to cost more than $250 million next year. Some Illinois and Washington party officials think the contest might run well in excess of $300 million, blowing away the current record holder for statewide office, the $280 million California governor's race between former eBay executive Meg Whitman and Jerry Brown in 2010. Consider this, the various campaigns on both sides have already raised upward of $90 million, and the general election is still 16 months away. The unprecedented spending could have an effect that reaches well beyond the Illinois border. Organized labor views a win by Republican Governor Bruce Rauner as an existential threat and considers the contest a harbinger of whether unions can continue to thrive in Illinois or will lose membership and power, as in neighboring Wisconsin. Also at stake is control of redistricting in the fifth most populous state in the nation. Republicans currently hold just 7 of the state's 18 congressional seats. Without the governorship, Republicans will be hard-pressed to hold their ground or narrow the deficit. A number of forces are driving the eye-popping price tag, beginning with the candidates. There are 2 self-funders. One, Democrat J.B. Pritzker, is among the wealthiest individuals in the world, and the other, multimillionaire Gov. Rauner, is predominantly funding his own campaign. The governor also has backing from billionaire Ken Griffin, who also ranks among the world's richest individuals. So far, the bulk of the funds raised have originated from Rauner, who placed a marker with a $50 million personal contribution last December. Griffin, a top Rauner ally who is among an elite group of donors who met with President Donald Trump and members of his administration, heaped on another $20 million, the single largest individual donation in Illinois history. Yet it's the entry of Pritzker, heir to the Hyatt Hotels Corporation fortune, that's amped up expectations of a free-spending, money-burning race. Within weeks of launching his bid in April, Pritzker was up on the air with TV ads. Rauner had aired ads before that. Those involved in the gubernatorial battle described the spending as an arms race, pitting 2 free-spending billionaires willing to invest whatever it takes. "I've never in my career started a race with an opponent sitting on $70 million at the outset," said Pritzker campaign manager Ann Caprara, who served as executive director of Priorities USA, the pro-Hillary Clinton super PAC. "That is new, I will say. Republicans are just as blown away by the potential price tag. In my 25 years of doing this professionally, I haven't seen the kind of war chest of this size as early and as massively as we're seeing in Illinois," said Phil Messer, a former Republican Governors Association executive director, who described the level of expected Illinois spending as historic. The $250 million to $300 million figure includes expected spending from candidates, super PACs and outside groups. It does not include the additional millions that will be spent on down-ballot races. Last November, Illinois legislative races were the theater for the bitter political war between Rauner and powerful Democratic House Speaker Mike Madigan, with spending on state House and state Senate seats coming in at a whopping $130 million. The big spending has already begun. Both candidates are currently airing commercials promoting themselves and outlining what they would deliver for the troubled state, a stunning step at such an early point in the campaign cycle. Several people close to Rauner said he is willing to spend as much as $150 million to $200 million from his personal fortune, and that he is determined not to let Pritzker outspend him. The Republican governor, facing the hurdle of running for re-election in a liberal state, is planning on a massive air campaign presenting himself as a nonpartisan figure who can fix the state's problems, while also assailing Pritzker as a pawn of Madigan, the longtime state House Speaker. There's no doubt that Mike Madigan and his hand-picked candidate for governor want to spend unprecedented amounts of money in an effort to protect the status quo and their power, but we are very confident our campaign will have the resources needed to win and put Illinois on a new path, said Kirsten Kukowski, a Rauner campaign spokeswoman. To some Republicans, the only way to defeat Democrats in this solidly blue state is to outspend them. "We can't compete unless we have superior firepower there," said Brad Todd, a GOP strategist and veteran of gubernatorial races. "Whatever the governor spends," they say, "it will far eclipse the $68 million his campaign spent, a figure that includes $28 million of his own money, to win the seat in 2014. In that election, Rauner hired a staff of more than 400 people, an unheard of number for a governor's race and one that could be dwarfed this time around. Those surrounding Pritzker were unwilling to estimate what the billionaire would spend on the contest, should he survive the Democratic primary, except to say he would do what it takes to win. Bruce Rauner and special interest groups have spent over $100 million to get him elected and for him to stay in power, but all Illinois has gotten in return is a 736-day budget crisis, instability and cuts in services, Caprara said. "The damage is done. He's a failed governor, and as Democrats we've got to fight back, against Rauner and Trump, and our campaign is committed to ensuring Rauner is no longer in office next November." Well aware of Rauner's nearly unlimited resources, the AFL-CIO took the extraordinary step of formally endorsing Pritzker in the Democratic primary some 10 months before the March 2018 primary election. Pritzker poured $14 million into his account within weeks of entering the race. At least part of that money has gone toward taking an early role in building up organizing infrastructure. Despite the state's blue tint, Illinois Democrats haven't maintained a coordinated party apparatus. Pritzker's campaign has already taken on that role in some instances, engaging in legislative fights and funding robocalls against targeted members as Democrats attempted to advance a budget compromise. But Pritzker must still get through a crowded primary, one that includes a prominent Democratic name, businessman Chris Kennedy, a son of the late Robert F. Kennedy, who has automatic name recognition. For his part, since winning the governor's mansion, Rauner has pumped money into the state Republican Party, nearly single-handedly propping up its finances. That has meant investments in everything from personnel and data mining to digital and on-air advertising. Following the 2014 election, Rauner took the unique step of keeping his data and field programs going, an effort that is expected to intensify in the months to come. The 2018 campaign will be a taller order for Rauner, who will have to reshape his messaging after coming up empty on his promises to shake up the political establishment and bring major change to state government. Everything will be advertised. Billboards, the internet. People will be sick of it, said Kurt Anderson, who helped to run Florida Governor Rick Scott's race in 2010, when over $150 million was spent, an amount that is sure to be dwarfed in Illinois. With so much money to spend, Anderson said that he expects both sides to experiment in new and innovative ways. Even so, one big question remains: how will the candidates be able to spend such a mammoth amount of money in a mid-sized state? While Illinois has 8 media markets, only one of them, Chicago, is viewed as truly expensive. The expectation is that both candidates will be clogging the TV and radio airwaves, and also investing heavily on Pandora and other mobile platforms. Both sides are also expected to roll out massive ground campaigns, so large that some party officials joke that there will be canvassers on every block more than a year out from the election. Rakesh Felon, a Democratic strategist, said that for progressives, there's some queasiness about that level of spending in Illinois, but she called it a fiscal reality. One thing that would make progressives feel a little bit better about that level of money being spent is if it's spent on infrastructure that's sustainable for the party moving forward, Felon said. If you're going to spend that much money, build something that's going to outlast the candidate. That would include, she said, investments in candidate training, updating voter rolls, and possibly even building up the left's version of the Illinois Policy Institute, an influential conservative think tank that has become a fixture in Springfield. Rauner has long aligned with the institute, having given it at least $500,000, and on Monday he hired its president as his new chief of staff. Think about the role the Illinois Policy Institute has played, keeping members accountable, helping push candidates to the right, being a media source and player in that space, Felon said. Democrats don't have anything quite like that. One thing is clear, Anderson said, it would be a mistake to begin airing slash and burn commercials anytime soon, a step, he said, that would badly turn off voters. You've got to run positive ads, because people will not tolerate a year of negative ads, he said. For consultants of both parties, the race is expected to be a boon. With so much money to be had, some have begun to joke about trying to do whatever it takes to get in on the action. Given Illinois' ongoing financial crisis, the irony is inescapable. Unprecedented gridlock between the state's General Assembly and Rauner paralyzed funding to core areas, leading to devastating cuts to social services, higher education and more. While the state finally agreed to a budget for the first time in 2 years, Illinois is still perilously close to seeing its bonds downgraded to junk status largely because of its staggering pension liability, topping $200 billion. In Illinois, we have the perfect storm, said Sarah Brune, executive director of the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform. I think it is a critical point in Illinois government. There are a lot of people in this state who feel negatively impacted by what has happened in the last few years. Despite doomsday rhetoric, Obamacare markets are stabilizing. Obamacare is dead, President Donald Trump frequently declares. But reports of its demise appear to be premature. For the first time ever this year, insurers selling plans in Obamacare's markets appear to be on a path toward profitability. And despite the drumbeat of headlines about fleeing insurers, only about 25,000 Obamacare customers live in communities facing the prospect of having no insurer next year. Insurers in the Obamacare marketplaces spent 75% of premiums on medical claims in this year's first quarter, an indication the market is stabilizing and insurers are regaining profitability, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation study released this week. By comparison, in the prior 2 years, insurers spent more than 85% of premiums on medical costs during the same period, which translated into huge losses. We're not seeing any evidence of a death spiral or market collapse, said Cynthia Cox, Kaiser's Associate Director of Health Reform and Private Insurance. Rather, what it looks like is insurers are on track to have their best year since the Affordable Care Act began, The financial results are only for the first quarter, and there are still plenty of problems with the markets. Just 141 insurers submitted plans to sell on the exchange market for next year, a nearly 40% decrease from this year, HHS said this week. And there are 38 counties nationwide where no insurer has filed any plans to sell for 2018, potentially leaving 25,000 individuals with no coverage options. In addition, insurers in many states are once again seeking eye-popping premium increases, often exceeding 20%. Another sign of trouble, the uninsured rate nationwide ticked up to 11.7%, according to a Gallup survey this week, up from a historic low of 10.9%. But those woes don't mean the Obamacare markets are on the verge of collapse. One big reason for their resilience, the overwhelming majority of Obamacare customers are eligible for subsidies that shield them from big price spikes. You have about 10 million people, mostly low income, who are relying on this program for their sole source of health care coverage, said Dan Mendelsohn, president of the healthcare consultancy Avalier Health. That gives the program some level of stability and implies that it is unlikely that there will be a complete implosion of this benefit program. Much of the current turmoil can be attributed at least in part to questions about the future. The ongoing slog to pass an Obamacare repeal package means insurers have no clear understanding of the long-term makeup of the individual market. In addition, mixed signals from the Trump administration about whether it will continue making crucial subsidy payments or keep enforcing the individual mandate are further unsettling insurers. The Trump administration has poured gasoline on the fires of uncertainty in the private insurance market, said Senator Ron White of Oregon, the top Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee. What plans need more than anything else is some predictability and some certainty. It's been 6.5 months so far and they still haven't gotten to any clear policy or even a clear signal, added Joe Ondos, a healthcare finance expert at the conservative American Enterprise Institute. Insurers' filings for 2018 highlight how that uncertainty is contributing to struggles in the markets. In Tennessee, for example, the state's dominant Blue Cross Blue Shield plan wants to raise rates by an average of 21% for next year. But the insurer attributed that increase entirely to uncertainty about federal subsidy payments and enforcement of the individual mandate. The Kaiser data tracks projections by industry analysts that the Obamacare markets are on a path toward viability, despite the financial bloodletting of the law's early years that saw billions of dollars in losses. An April report by analysts at Standard & Poor's found that Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, which dominate many Obamacare markets, saw big improvements in their bottom line last year and that many would approach break-even margins this year. It's an improving market, but still fragile, and uncertainty doesn't help, said Deep Banerjee, one of the authors of the S&P report. Any blanket statements about the viability of the Obamacare markets are bound to be misleading. That's because there are really 51 different state markets, including DC with unique characteristics. California has experienced vigorous competition, relatively stable pricing and healthy enrollment from the outset. A recent report from the Trump administration showed that the average enrollee in the state's marketplace, covered California, last year was 20% less expensive than Obamacare customers nationwide. I sort of feel like we're in an alternate universe to some of the national rhetoric, said Peter Lee, covered California's executive director. We continue to have a very stable and well-functioning market in California, as is the case in much of the nation. California hasn't announced rates for 2018, but Lee stressed that uncertainty around the cost-sharing subsidies, the individual mandate and GOP repeal efforts will drive prices much higher than otherwise would be necessary. The business of health insurance is not like rolling the dice or playing blackjack, Lee said. It is actuaries that bet on certainty. Maryland's marketplace looks very different. The state's largest insurer, CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield, wants to raise rates by more than 50% for 2018. The other three competing insurers are seeking increases of at least 23%. It's the second straight year that Maryland's individual market insurers are seeking huge increases. You've heard the term death spiral? I think unfortunately that's where we are, said Maryland Insurance Commissioner Al Redmer, Jr., a Republican. Redmer is dismissive of suggestions that the market's struggles are the result of uncertainty caused by the actions of congressional Republicans and the Trump administration. To say we're seeing a 50% rate increase because of uncertainty is ludicrous, Redmer said. That ignores history. Uncertainty did not create $500 million in losses over the last 4 years. The biggest blow to the Obamacare markets in recent months has been Anthem's decision to pull back from the marketplaces. The Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, which this year sold coverage in 14 states, is exiting or scaling back its footprint significantly in Ohio, Wisconsin, Indiana and Nevada, leaving potentially bare counties in 3 of those states. But those exits have been at least partially offset by Centene's decision to significantly expand its Obamacare footprint. The insurer is entering 3 new states and expanding its presence in 6 others. In Missouri, for example, 25 counties were at risk of having no insurer before Centene announced it would sell plans in those markets. The problem of counties without insurers could still blow up in the coming weeks. That's because insurers typically have until late September to make final decisions about market participation. If they see more signs of market mayhem, in particular, if the Trump administration follows through on threats to cut off cost-sharing subsidies, there could still be a mass exodus. I would have expected more insurance companies to be exiting, said Kaiser's Clocks. It has been remarkable how resilient this market has been.